Okay, welcome to our Thursday night Q&A. This is what I call gardening with William DeMille. This is where I help you have the very best garden of your entire life. This is where we discuss gardening and farming and livestock, the Georgic tradition, soil health, education. The purpose of this is to help your health from the ground up. Today's October 19th, 2023. My book is ready to get. If you haven't got it yet, get it. I had a fantastic mentoring call with a guy from California this week, and he actually pays me quite a bit of money to do a call. And for the last half of the call, he just told me how much he was loving my book. So that was pretty funny to me. Instead of asking questions, he was complimenting me. And I was flattered, and it was great, but it is a good book. I've worked 50 years on it, almost. So tonight is week 71. And there are 9 ways that I help people grow food. I've got my YouTube channel, the weekly Q&A, which is what we're doing right now, my Patreon channel, and then I have a soil laboratory where I can check all of the living microbes in the soil to see how your soil is functioning. I've got my 17-week boot camp, and we call that the Georgic Schoolroom. So when you go to the website, you're going to see Georgic Schoolroom, and that's what that is. And we are now taking signups for 2024. So if you know anybody who needs to become ecologically literate, they can come and do this, and you can get all the details at www.georgicrevolution.com. 3-day boot camp. That is a class you come here, and that is alive and well. It's going to happen in January. And you can go to the website to find out all the details about that. So our website we've redone it. It's the same name, but it's all new content. And we're just getting it up and going right now, so you can go and check that out. We're still editing things, and I know that there's some typos in this, so that's going to make somebody's eye twitch. But it's okay, because we're in the process of fixing all that stuff. I am available for consulting for your farm or your garden or your food production. Whatever you're trying to do, I am for hire to help you with that. Make sure you have a copy of my book so that you can have context on the latest science that is in this world right now with the old-time wisdom. And when you marry those two things together, we get a beautiful functioning soil. And if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, go to georgicrevolution.com and enter your email so that you can get the newsletter if we ever send one out, which we will. So we have a map here tonight. We're just going to do a quick couple of minutes, and we're going to talk about maps. I've got 2 maps here. This one is about desertification. So this map just simply shows the large areas of the world that are desert. And the people who study this are telling us that the deserts are growing. And there's a lot of information about the deserts growing. 150 years ago, Australia did not look like it does in this map here. It's mostly desert now. And that is a tragedy. Much of North America did not look like this 150 years ago. So the information we have is showing that deserts are growing, and the latest information that I've researched is saying that we're losing land that's productive at the rate of the size of Pennsylvania every year. And they also say that that is an exponential number. So in 5 years, it won't be 5 Pennsylvanias, it'll be times that. Now, I don't know if I completely agree with these studies. It's interesting to see this, and we know that desertification is real and that it is certainly happening, but I don't know if that math is accurate. I'm not sure that I agree. And there are very little studies being done on people reversing desertification. There's a lot of places where the desertification is turning around. And there's, a lot of fun documentaries. There's dozens of pictures people are taking around the world. There's a lot of the permaculture people. There's a lot of other people who are showing how we are turning deserts into beautiful forests and beautiful grasslands. But this is just an interesting thing to look at, and this is something that we study extensively here with the things that I teach and the things that I educate. So I'm going to go to the next slide here real quick. And in the things that we teach in our Georgic schoolroom here, whether it's a 3-day boot camp or whether it's the 17-week class, or if it's online classes, and we do have an online class coming shortly. And I don't know what that means. It's my winter project to get my online class up and running. So in the springtime, it will be available. It will be a series of videos that you can purchase and go through. And it will cover everything as if you had come to the 17-week course. But we study permaculture, biodynamics, holistic management, Georgics, and old-time wisdom of the ages, and also the latest scientific breakthroughs from some of the smartest scientists in the world. People like Elaine Eham and David Johnson and Christine Jones, and I could say 50 other names, but that's not the purpose of this tonight. This map is showing the different regions of the world. We've got the polar regions, we've got temperate regions, and on the map here it's calling them zones, and that's okay. I prefer to call them regions because people mix up the zone with like the USDA zone map. And so to differentiate that, I always try to say region. And then we've got the subtropical and tropical. The way that you introduce what you're doing and the information that you're studying has to be within context of what happens in these zones. So if we just look at this real quick, let's say that you're watching something on YouTube about permaculture. And it's somebody, let's just say it's Jeff Lawton. He's one of the evangelists of permaculture. He's a pretty great guy. He teaches great stuff. So if we just look at this map real quick, what we're going to see here is Jeff Lawton works in deserts, some of the harshest deserts in the world, and he also works in the tropics. And what you're going to be doing in those areas is going to be a little bit different. You will adjust the principles differently. What if a person lives in the polar regions? People live in the polar regions. There's a lot of people who live in Alaska and in Canada and Siberia. These are polar regions. The further north you go or south you go, the more dependent you will be on animals to have a livelihood. In northern Alaska, in that Arctic Circle, you don't really eat plants. Not like we do on the equator or in a temperate zone. In the United States, when we think of growing our food, we're thinking of growing a garden and having chickens, possibly a milk cow, raising a beef to butcher, something like that. Well, that is not a thing you do in the polar regions. And let's just be clear that in the temperate zones, which means you have a winter and then a summer, you're going to have the very best soil in those zones. And in the tropics, you're going to have the poorest soils. And in the polar regions, the soil is irrelevant because you're not dealing with the soil. So it's pretty fun because you get on YouTube and then I start getting questions because people say, oh yeah, I was watching YouTube. And I say, where do you live? And there's something like New Mexico or Arizona or Utah. And then they're watching these permaculture people who live in a tropical area. And then they start incorporating what's happening in the tropics, but they're in a temperate zone. So we need to understand how these things are being applied in different areas. So you would apply the principles of all of these things, permaculture, biodynamics, holistic management, and Georgics, you would apply them a little bit differently depending on what zone you're in. So I'm in Nevada, northern Nevada. I'm very close to the Idaho border. And I would do things very differently here, because here we can create a fantastic fertile soil because we're right smack dab in the middle of a temperate zone. So I can make compost one time. All right. One time I create compost, and with the compost that I create, I'm going to be able to get a whole bunch of fantastic microbes. And if I do a really good job collecting the microbes, then, and of course, we collect them with the compost, let me be clear. So we make the compost, we collect all those microbes, we make an inoculant, and we put those microbes on my garden. And then I take really good care of those microbes by keeping living plants in the soil all the time, and by keeping a thick detritosphere on the soil all the time for the next 200 years. And if there's no big natural disaster in that history of 200 years, and I maintain that soil the way I'm supposed to, that one inoculation of the one-time compost is all I needed to do. That's all I ever had to do. Once you get the compost made and you get the microbes in that soil, they will stay there and they will thrive as long as you maintain a home and you maintain water and you maintain their two major food sources, which is detritus and the exudates from living roots. So there you go, we're done. And so people ask me the question, why does Jeff Lawton make so much compost? He makes compost all the time and he has 20 ways of making it. He probably has 3 or 4 really great ways of making it. I haven't even counted, but he has a lot of different methods and he does a good job and he's always making compost. It's because he's often working in tropical places. And I know the tropical places because of the foods he's growing. He's growing all these beautiful tropical plants, and so it's in a tropical place or subtropical. Now, what happens in a temperate zone? We have a summer. You don't get a lot of rainfall. You are probably irrigating in certain parts of the temperate zone. Other places have more rainfall. But you have a winter and you have snow. There's a long dormant season. And so that's temperate. And those soils are really working hard. And then they are resting. They have a long rest. What happens in tropics? Well, you have a hot, humid summer. And then you have a rainy season. And then you have a hot, humid summer. And then you have a rainy season. And that rainy season could be a long, long time. And it rains too much. And the rain carries the nitrogen out of the soil. And if it rains enough, it can even carry a lot of other nutrients out of the soil. It just washes it out over time because there's way too much rain. So what do? Well, you have to get that fertility back in the soil. And that's why a lot of these people who are making videos about all the compost, for example, I've been talking about Jeff Lawton tonight. He makes so much compost because they have to continually put fertility into their soil. The soil doesn't function the same in a tropical zone as it does in a temperate zone. And then there's deserts. Deserts are usually, I'm going to adjust my screen real quick, but if we look at this here, let's look at this. So I've got my cursor out here. We've got this zone right across the United States here, and then it comes right across Africa, and then Asia. All right. So I'm going to go back a slide and look at where the deserts are. The western part of North America, Africa, and much of Asia. Now, if we go to the southern hemisphere, we've got the same latitudes. We've got part of South America here, most of South Africa area, and almost all of Australia. So let me go to the slide we were just on. And so we have desertification here. And a lot of that is that temperate zone, South Africa. And then most of this, Australia, is temperate zone. And then we have a temperate zone right across there. So temperate zone is where most of our desertification is. So it's interesting how these two things correlate. So if we're in an area where we have desert, I'm going to go back a slide. So we're right here somewhere. I'm somewhere around here where it's probably somewhat red, I'm guessing. And red is pretty arid. Okay. And then we got semi-arid. Why is it showing the Sahara Desert as semi-arid, or it's hyper-arid because it's light, and then you got the top here and the bottom. So it's interesting how different people write maps and do things, and I don't even have answers for all this, but it's just super interesting how these correlate, and then it gets confusing as people are learning about how to use holistic management, for instance. I'm in an area where the grass won't grow very good, or we can't get trees to grow. What do we do? And then you say, oh, the permaculture people, man, they have the best designs. Yeah, they certainly do. And the best videos are out there are in tropical areas. So it's out of context for those of us who live in these more desertified areas with because we're in a temperate zone. Does it mean what they're saying is wrong? No, they're absolutely right. So we need to find the videos that they're talking about when they're talking about the temperate zones, and they do have those. But I've tried to make it very clear, and I didn't make this distinction as clear in the last 2 years of my class here. And I just saw the correlation of these two maps just in the last couple of weeks as I was doing research. And I thought, I am adding this to my curriculum. So this is going in my curriculum for my class next year because it's a fun thing to look at. All right, so that is the end of our whatever we are doing here, our presentation tonight. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen here, and we are going to go to Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them right now, and we'll spend a few minutes on that, and it'll be fun.
So we've been collecting our kitchen scraps, vegetation and all, to prepare to make some compost. And you had said in the past, put it in the freezer so it'll all decompose together when you're ready.
Right, yeah.
My freezer is getting full. I don't have enough room for all the things I'm trying to collect. So I've been putting them, you had mentioned, making a 5-gallon bucket and putting things in there. Well, I didn't have one handy at the moment when I started. So I started putting them in gallon Ziploc bags and then in shopping bags. And now I have 12 or 13 of these. So I'm just wondering, how much do you really need to get that started and really have something worthwhile when you're done?
Yeah. So do you know how much total volume you have? I mean, I don't know how big your bags are, and how many you have. Do you think you have 10 gallons maybe?
Yeah,
total?
I think about 10 gallons. Yeah, that's about where I'm at now.
Yeah. So your ratio of a compost, it's going to be 30% of that green material. Now you can still go out and get more stuff. If you could mow a lawn and then rake up those grass clippings, that would be a green material. If you have a bale of hay that was cut when it was green, that would be green material. Any green living plant would be, you could add it to that, and then you would know your total volume. So you may end up with like 5 or 10 buckets that were all green type materials, either food scraps, kitchen scraps, and then whatever else you can collect. So that would be, let's say you had 3 buckets total. Well, then that tells you that that's going to be 30% of 10 buckets. And so you just kind of figure that out. And then you'd say, okay, well, I need 60% of browns. So at this time of year, it's easy to get brown stuff because leaves that are falling off of trees are brown once they fall off. And so you just collect those, and they're very light and fluffy. So you would want to smash those down So just stick them in a bucket and then just jump up and down on it until they're compressed, and then it would be a similar volume. So
Okay.
you would have 6, buckets of brown, 3 buckets of green, and then you need 1 more bucket of a high nitrogen component, which would be
Mhm.
something like alfalfa hay, or a high nitrogen manure like chicken manure, or
Mm.
maybe a cow manure if you know someone who's feeding a milk cow and they're feeding it a very fancy diet of the best alfalfa hay. That would be a high nitrogen manure.
Okay.
So,
So,
yeah, so just collect all your greens and get them in a container so that you know how much you have, and then that tells you 30%, and then you can just kind of gauge on how much other stuff to get.
okay. We might be able to go collect some leaves at some neighboring places. People probably wouldn't care if we asked them if we could collect their leaves.
Yeah, it's usually a problem for people at this time of year, and most
Uh-huh.
people are just throwing them away because they don't value it. So
Okay. Yeah, we have a neighbor who has a pile of steer manure that um is old. I mean, it just smells like ground. It doesn't smell like steer or anything. But I have no idea what kind of cow it came from or anything. So I don't know what it has in it. It's just I
yeah,
just know steer manure.
and it'd be fine to use it in your compost, but if you don't know what it's eating, it's probably not going to be a high nitrogen to heat your pile up real good.
Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of manures are, but they need to be eating a lot of grain and super good alfalfa hay. And that's why chicken manure is good, because chicken feed is usually predominantly a grain product. So,
Okay.
the other thing that's super good high nitrogen, if you could run across any kind of old rotten grain or seeds or something, that sometimes people have like food storage or something that got bugs in it and they're going to throw it away. I mean, that's harder to find though. But
Mhm.
if that happened, or a farmer with extra grain that was somehow contaminated with something that the I don't know, people raise wheat and want to sell it for food consumption, but if it has other seeds in it when they were combining their uh, field, sometimes you can get that really cheap.
Okay.
So,
Ask around.
but those are high nitrogen materials, is the point of what I'm saying here. So,
Mhm. Okay.
okay, good. Let me look at my chat and see if.
You're asking for that freezer.
All right, Helena, if you have any questions? She said thank you. That means no. Well, we're gonna call it unless you have another question, Ron.
Oh, we thought of one more thing. We were going to ask you if you've already had your first frost where you are.
We've had a couple of frosts here, maybe 3, but nothing serious. It's been a pretty long fall for us, which has been fun because my cabbages are getting big and beautiful, and we picked a gorgeous cauliflower the other day, and my Brussels sprouts are growing. Normally, you can't grow those this late in the fall here, but they're doing great this year. It's really awesome. So it's been a beautiful blessing.
That's great. So the other thing is we have we've been trying to knock down our tumbleweeds so that we can put our dry pasture seeds out there. But we're noticing that you had that one, I think I read it in the book, where you had that test where you walk around and you measure how far things are from one another and how much bare ground there is available.
Yeah.
We're finding tons of bare ground, even though it looks like you look out on the field, it's all like continuous tumbleweed. When you're actually walking the 2-wheel trimmer around, you notice that there's like a foot between each tumbleweed. They just got so big, they all joined, but there's nothing. It's like a dust bowl under them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like complete dust bowl everywhere. So I'm just hopeful that our seeds will take this winter and actually do something worthwhile.
Yeah. And that's the hope, is to cover the ground with vegetation, So thank goodness for the tumbleweeds, because at least they're trying to do the job.
Yeah, something. At least keep all the soil from, draining down the hill.
Yeah, and as you bow those and chop them up, that's good because that's going to be fungal food. So that's a good thing because they're old dead woody things at this point. So that's going to be a good thing for that soil.
Oh, good. Yeah, so we'll keep knocking them down, and then we've just been putting out the seeds as we have a large section available. Then we put out the seeds and
Nice.
let's see. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, have a fantastic night.
You
Thank you.
too.
You too.
Thank you very
Take care.
much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.